You're listening to Back to Us Radio on the Back to Us Network.
Who have I become? 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 Who have I become?
Good evening, Strong Stance listeners. This is your host, Eli Strong, and we are coming to you this show with, a topic that I think is going to be really great, and we've got about 3 guests that we're going to talk to about this topic, and I'm hoping that you're here with the want to kind of listen to these experiences and kind of see what's going on and join us for this little hour of time. But it's Pride season again, and while so many people are attending festivals, parties, and parades to celebrate the equality gains that have been made in the LGBTQ community and rejoicing in the existence of any space that allows us to truly exist in the comfort of our own skins, without the judgment and burdens that come with daily life in a non-queer world, I have to ask the question of where the trans community fits into this schema. It's ironic that we have to have a conversation about where trans people belong in an annual affair that basically celebrates an event sparked by trans women, but here we are. So where do trans people fit into the traditional Pride landscape? And is this an event within which we should fight for our rightful place, or should we focus our efforts on something more targeted to our specific issues? Like our previous conversation about the T's place within the queer acronym, I'm drawn back to questions of collaboration within the whole, or the splintering off of the most vulnerable of our population. Tonight, we're going to engage in a discussion with 3 guests about their personal experiences in Pride, as well as their views on the necessity, or perhaps lack thereof, of the trans and gender non-conforming community within the celebration. And so joining us, we have Melvin Whitehead, and for those of you that have listened to our shows, Melvin will no doubt not be a name that you are not familiar with. Melvin is a Black, gay, and transgender man living in the Chicago area. He is a librarian, educator, and activist. Melvin, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you again for joining us one of the many times and gracing the airwaves with your amazing intellect and sultry voice.
Happy to do so, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Our next guest is Tracy McDaniel. Many of our listeners will also remember Tracy from previous shows. Tracy McDaniel is an advocate and community organizer with a mission to empower and fight for equality and human rights for transgender and gender non-conforming people. Tracy, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Eli. Thank you for inviting me to participate.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us again. I really appreciate you taking the time.
My pleasure.
And our third guest is Alex Truesdale Perry. Alex is a white, queer, trans guy getting the hell out of D.C. He's been involved in the Maryland, D.C. trans community for over 10 years and has been helping organize DCATs for the last 6 or so years. Alex, is that correct? How are you doing?
I have no idea. I am hot, miserable, and sweaty, but that's about as good as you're going to get in D.C. summer, so.
That is correct. So first question, Alex, where are you moving?
I am moving to Seattle.
Where the weather is a
following
little bit more tolerable.
one of our previous DCATS facilitators.
Nice. Everyone goes away at some point for the West Coast or something else.
Yeah, I'm gonna be staying in his house and then moving into a place that's less than a mile from his.
That's awesome. So for those of you that have heard me talk before, DCATS is obviously a group that you've heard about before, and so Alex and I have worked together for several years with DCATS, and so we are both now finally flying away. You know, I flew away, what was it, about 8 or 9 months ago, and now Alex is also moving on to bigger and brighter things. So let's, unlike most of our shows where we have, guests where we kind of have a discussion with one and a discussion with another, I really want this to just be kind of a group discussion. So let's really just kind of jump in. I mean, the first thing that I'd like to know, and I don't know, Melvin, if you want to take a first crack at this, is I want to know each of your experiences and participation in Pride events through the years, right? Like not just this year or, last year, but throughout the years. How has that changed over the years? Do you even go to Pride? Like, is that something that you take part in? So Melvin, what's been your experience in the past with Pride events?
I started going to Pride when I was about 16 years old, and it started with a youth Pride event in DC. And I think at the time, me coming out, me realizing I was, not straight, it served a, very important purpose to be around other gay folks. And over the years, I continued to attend Pride in Baltimore, DC, Detroit, Chicago. But I think, over the past few years, that's sort of changed. I haven't been feeling either way. I haven't really felt compelled to go to Prides over the past few years. I think the increasing corporatization, I feel, of Prides over the years has sort of felt like, it's not really a community event anymore. And so what I do these days, though, I tend to go to alternative Pride events.
Right.
Things like I've been to a few Black Prides in the DC and Chicago area. I've gone to, some dyke marches. There's one Chicago's trans inclusive. There was a Big Boy Pride event in DC this year for basically thick Black gay men and their admirers. And I was also a DJ at the Dyke March / Latino Pride event in Chicago last year. And so I feel that these events come from the community, and so I tend to enjoy them more. There aren't politicians and corporate sponsors, and I tend to enjoy them more. And they're also, I think that the mainstream prides I've attended previously, just haven't had great experiences with those. They also feel too white. They also feel very cisgender. Some of the Black Pride events too, for that matter. But yeah, that's been my experience with prides over the years.
Yeah, and we'll definitely get to the corporatization. That is something that I definitely want to talk about because I tend to agree. Tracy, what kind of Pride celebrations, if any, do you partake in or have you over the years within either your activism work or just your personal life? What's your comfort level or attendance level with Pride?
Well, my participation in previous years have been for the organizational activism work. Personally, I've been reluctant to participate in Pride. Here in Georgia, we have two Prides. We have the Black Pride, and then we have the regular Pride in October. I think that for some time now, I've been feeling like trans people have been an afterthought. Maybe let's throw a trans person in. Let's throw a little trans event, which really wasn't thought out. And sometimes when you have trans events by like Pride organizations, it's not really focused on the trans people. You show up to these events, and then when you see the stories afterward, you don't see the trans people being represented in those stories. So, however, I've been getting personally, I've been more interested in Pride because here with the Pride in October, there's new leadership, and I think that with the new leadership who's in a relationship with a trans person, as far as I'm aware, then they're more thoughtful about including trans people and just not throwing them in there just for diversity's sake. So I'm personally beginning to appreciate Pride more now that I see that there is an effort to not only tokenize trans people, but to make sure that we're included and we have a voice in the Pride.
Yeah, I absolutely hear exactly where you're coming from. Because, I feel like that's just one of those things where if all you feel like you're being done is, oh, I'm checking a box for them, right? Yeah. It's like, why am I here? Yeah. So, absolutely. Alex, you and I have been doing Pride stuff for years, but what is for our listeners, what is your participation in different Pride events, either in DC or even back in your hometown, if at all, or, over the years? Yeah, I know. That was for comic relief.
So, yeah, I don't think this got mentioned on the air. I'm originally from Wyoming. My hometown has 4,000 people. We do not have Pride. I heard somebody, I can't remember who I was talking to, we were talking about Pride events, and they said that Denver was surprisingly huge. I'm like, it's not surprising because everybody from all these piddly little towns is driving, because like Denver is going to be the nearest thing to a real city if you're
right.
Wyoming or the rest of Colorado or, so my primary experience with Pride has been in DC. I think I attended one or two things just kind of randomly before I started attending with DCATs. So with DCATs, I have pretty consistently, probably every year for at least the last 6. So I might have skipped a year here or there on one of the events, but I've tabled for, I think, pretty much every Trans Pride and pretty much every Capitol Pride Street Festival during that time.
And do you ever take part in any of the Baltimore stuff?
I've gone up to Baltimore twice. One of my ex-boyfriend lives up in Baltimore, and so I went with him a couple of years. I was just about to mention that. So I've been to Baltimore's Pride. I did their block party, which is the afternoon party thing, twice, I think, and their festival thing once. And I have actually been out to San Francisco for Pride, which was been insane and overwhelming. I mostly just watched the parade. I walked around the street festival, but not like, oh, wait, that's a lie. That's a lie. I also went to their Trans Pride thing that was in the park. So that's kind of my general participation has been overwhelmingly DC, and for the most part, I've pretty much only been attending because DCAS has been tabling, and I've got the car, and ergo I have the box of stuff.
Yes, and I appreciated that car every year. So if it wasn't for, so like you said, it's like you're mostly doing it for DCATs. If it wasn't for DCATs, or even when you're there with DCATs, as Tracy and Melvin mentioned, they kind of find, when they go to Pride, it makes them feel a certain way or they see certain things. What is your general take on the Prides that you have been to, either, as a trans person, not, either way?
Yeah. So I feel like, so the DC stuff is the stuff I've really kind of got a feel for. The other things I went, I was just kind of there and I wasn't really interacting because it's not my city and, the resources wouldn't be for me anyway, so to say. And so it's just kind of a party, and that's fine for what it is. I'm not a terribly social person, so that's not a huge driver for me. For DC, we've got Capitol Pride, which is this like gigantic rolling corporate monolith that happens every year, and it's so big, and it feels really impersonal, sort of thing. Like Tracy mentioned, feeling like you are filling a checkbox. Right. Capitol Pride doesn't even feel like they've got checkboxes. They're like, if you want to come, you'll sign up. We don't really care. Are you there?
Yeah. Tracy, say that again.
I said okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So, like, I feel like DC Pride doesn't even, they don't even have checkboxes. Like, nobody's ever, like, approached DCATs or, to my knowledge, maybe they're talking to other trans groups in the area, but, I don't feel like Capitol Pride is reaching out to specifically trans groups.
Right.
Maybe HRC, but, like, HRC doesn't really cut it.
That's right.
And, and it's this huge outside thing, and so I feel like, I don't know, it does. It feels kind of impersonal. It feels like there's not a whole lot of connection that can happen there. Also, it's hot and miserable.
Right.
DC Trans Pride is a little better. Well, it's a lot better, but it also has its own unique quirks.
Issues. Yeah. Yeah, and for those of our listeners that you know, Tracy said that in Atlanta, Tracy, you said that there is Black Pride and then there's regular Pride, correct?